Hello, this is the Commercial Landscaper Podcast with Robert Clinkenbeard. This show will transform your leadership by developing all areas of your life, business, family, personal and health. Only by fine-tuning yourself will you truly operate as a highly functioning leader. Super excited today to announce that we've just surpassed the 100th edition of the Commercial Landscaper Show, and we're going to see better things from this year. We're going to be introducing some education courses in leadership and sales that you could apply and join and try to improve yourself. So hopefully you can join us in some of these courses and reach out if you want to hear some new guests. This is all about bettering you, bettering your business, and make you function at a super high level. Thanks again, everyone. Cheers. Hi, this is Robert Clinkenbeard with the Commercial Landscapers Podcast. I'm super excited today to be joined by Neville Stein. Neville was recommended to me by a good friend of mine, John Duff, back in the UK. John Duff was my old roommate from Horticultural College at Notcutts, and recommended Neville come on the show and talk about the UK and Europe. So Neville, thanks for joining me, and looking forward to hearing about your background.
Oh, delighted, and it's great, and it's great that we've got John Duff in as a mutual contact or friend. And look, I hope he's doing really well selling his furniture up there in Scotland. I've chosen to go down a different route than John and really focused much more on providing consultancy to horticultural enterprises. So I've been in the horticultural industry for 45 years, 1977, and a lot of that time, until the mid-90s, was spent really working on commercial enterprises. And as I got more and more jobs within those commercial enterprises, I became really interested much more in business processes rather than in pure horticulture. So I love plants, but I wouldn't call myself a plantsman. I would call myself a specialist in the management of horticultural enterprises. So since I left employment in 1994, I've been consulting, principally in the UK and through Europe, but I've also been doing some work in China as well. And I'm consulting entirely with horticultural enterprises, and largely at the moment, it's with landscaping businesses and also production nurseries. And what I'm really doing is really helping people either drive plans forward, develop some strategy, or I'm looking at profitability issues and looking at how we can drive profitability in businesses. And particularly, actually, I've got a real demand at the moment from landscapers, certainly in the UK.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, such a great industry. Tell me a little bit about how you got into, landscaping and horticulture in the first place, because, it's not what I'm finding over here. It's, the parents are typically trying to push their kids off to the typical, college path of doctor or engineering or one of these more professional companies. So how did you move into horticulture in the first place?
Well, interestingly, perhaps like a lot of people, I rather dropped into it. I initially wanted to go into the Royal Air Force, and I remember taking my O-levels, they call them GCSEs now, at the age of 16. And before I got my results, I went along to the RAF recruitment office. I took the test for what was called a technician apprentice, but I failed the test. And actually, I'm just as glad, really, because, I've had the most stunning career in horticulture. And so my results came and they weren't very good. So I went back to school for another year to retake my O-levels. And while I was, thinking around what I might like to do, I thought I would try and explore a career in farming. A bizarre thought, because I'd never been on a farm in my life, but I read about it and it felt quite interesting. Now, in those days, certainly late 70s, if you wanted to go to an agricultural college or a land-based college to do any form of qualification, you had to work on an enterprise for a year before you went. And they call it a pre-college year. So, I thought, great, I'll go and do an ordinary national diploma in agriculture, and I'll try and get a pre-college year on a farm. So I remember phoning up 250 farmers and not getting a single interest. And, I even took adverts out in farming magazines. However, in the process of phoning up farmers, one farmer said to me, I haven't got a job, but I know a nurseryman called Peter Trenier who's looking for someone. So I phoned up Peter Trenier, cycled down to see him at the age of 16 and liked what I saw and started work for this very small retail mail order nursery. Peter was fantastic to me. His son was an absolute delight. And so instead of going to agricultural college, I went to horticultural college, where we learn about amenity horticulture, commercial production of plants and landscaping. And quite frankly, Robert, it's been the best.
It's great.
Been stunningly good. And what's really interesting is that, there is that perception that horticulture and agriculture is poorly paid. But, I've done really well and made a lot of money. Now, I can say that because this is going to be listened to by Americans, but when you say that to British people, they think, oh, Neville's being a bit arrogant here. But actually, but I want to mention that, not from a perception, not because I'm being arrogant, but I want to mention that because actually we need to break this perception. There's great money to be made in this industry. And we need to smash that perception. So if I'm telling you that I've made great money out of it, I'm not doing that to be arrogant. I'm telling you because I want to smash this perception and encourage people. Now, to be fair, to sort of switch that argument, if I was doing exactly what I was doing and using the skills that I've got in another industry where margins are higher, then I probably could have, been charging 3 or 4 times the amount I'm charging a day. But I've chosen to be in this industry, which I absolutely adore and love. So I recognize that has limited my earning potential. But despite that, if we put what I earn and what I've made in relation to other jobs in the industry, then I've done well.
No, that's great. And that's such a true statement because, myself and then, one of my partners, Bruce Wilson, who's been in the industry for 40, 50 years, maybe even more, has numerous examples of how people have done really well in this industry. The industry's done, a great job in promoting people and, just a good all-round nature, good people within the industry. So I think it was actually interesting. I had an interview with the outgoing president of the National Landscape Association across here, Bob Grover.
Oh.
And again, they're just talking about how they're just trying to promote the industry, try and get more younger people into the industry. And I think that's going to be really beneficial with stories like ours, people that have had some great exits over the last number of years.
Yeah.
So that's going to help out a lot.
I mean, I think I've got an interesting story about that, if you don't mind me saying.
Yeah, go for it.
But several years ago, in 2017, I do a lot of work with an organisation in the Republic of Ireland called Board Beer. They're called the Food Board, and they're responsible for marketing, not just food, but horticulture. And they've been a client of mine for years. So I organised for them a study tour for nursery owners in Maryland and Delaware and Pennsylvania. And I took them around, hired a bus, a coach, and we took them around to various nurseries. And we went to one particular nursery in Maryland that was, a large commercial operation. And most of the nurserymen that were with me on the trip were surprised about how many young people were working on this nursery. Well, what was really interesting is that these young people weren't doing those traditional nursery jobs of taking cuttings or doing, potting up plants, but they were really engaged in perhaps some of those newer jobs that we're seeing in the industry, some of those tech jobs, perhaps, working on, social media or marketing, or perhaps, looking at digital systems on nurseries and, analysing that data and implementing them. So there were a lot of young people working on the nursery, but not in those traditional sort of typically hands-on jobs. So I was quite encouraged with that, thinking, well, this is the future. And I think what's really interesting, if we look at the way agri-tech is going in the UK, people are talking about a lot of robotics, looking at data and data management, data collecting, analysing, and how you use that data to make better decisions on growing crops. those are all jobs that are going to be filled by graduates and young people. So I think that's really encouraging.
No, I agree 100%. And I have similar experiences where working with landscape companies, there are a lot more examples of those, larger companies now using software systems like Aspire. There's numerous, Boss LM, where there's all this data coming in, and all these sort of young tech savvy people are analyzing that data, working the systems. There's other irrigation systems out there like Weathermatic. There's GPS with all the trucks. So you're 100% right, with all this data coming in that is making the industry a little bit more tech savvy. So there's a good advantage of trying to promote this tech savvy industry to those younger people.
Yeah, well, I think you're right, but even away from the tech, particularly in landscaping, I'm seeing over here in the UK, a huge amount of people and younger people very interested in landscape architecture or garden design, and that's, there's a big demand for courses there. Now, of course, whether or not those courses are actually churning out too many garden designers, because I think we've probably got too many in the UK. But actually, what's really interesting is that the landscape sector is attracting younger people into it through that sort of landscape architect or garden design route.
No, I agree. And I see that, there's some college competitions over here, and I would say the majority of the people that are in those courses are on that design phase, or the design track per se. But even, back to your example, I went to a landscape nursery operation in Omaha, Nebraska, called Mulhall's. Been around for, it's an Irish based company. But what was interesting about their nurseries, they've changed their nursery almost into almost like a lifestyle where
interesting.
people are coming into it. There's furniture, there's a real great vibe around it, coffee shops and everything. But they have a line of people, queue of people lining up to apply for that, that nursery, because people just like almost like that outdoor office type environment.
Well, what's really interesting is there's a massive demand for that here in the UK. Spurred on by COVID. Obviously we had 2 substantial lockdowns. People, of course, were forced to work from home, and as they're working from home, they're looking at their outdoor space, thinking, "Do you know what? Let's improve this." Or if you've got a small space in your house and you are forced to work from home, and that's becoming a permanent feature in your life now, you're going to think, well, let's put this garden office out in the garden or in the yard, and let's landscape it and make it look attractive. I think, certainly the landscaping industry has had a massive uplift as a result of COVID, and it's been fantastic here in the UK. I think challenging at the moment, though, that demand isn't going to continue just yet, because we've got, probably the same as the USA, we've got some pretty serious headwinds coming economically. We've got inflation running over 10%. We've got energy bills that are horrendous. And so I think that might slightly inflate demand amongst certain sectors, certainly amongst the sort of small works type jobs. I mean, those people that are going to spend $250,000 to $500,000 on having their garden landscaped, they're going to be largely unaffected, as they always are. So I think we're going to see a real challenge in the sort of mid-market here in the UK, certainly at least in the next couple of years, until the energy costs are dealt with.
Hopefully that gets somewhat helped a little bit by changing leadership.
We're going to know today, because our new Prime Minister is announcing her plan today or tomorrow. So we're going to get a view of that certainly later in the day. Really.
So to circle back to how we started the conversation, we talked about how, the industry as a whole, how could we attract those people? And I think, we've seen that upward trend in interest in outdoor living. How can the industry as a whole, whether it be the national organizations, magazines, how can they build on that trend by trying to attract more people into that industry? Because I even found that when I talk to a company about recruiting laborers, they use the traditional methods to attract, these new laborers. I said, well, maybe you should think outside the box and refresh the ads, bring in some more young people again to help attract those people into the industry. And it's like the light bulb comes on.
Yeah, I think you're right. What I think we need, certainly in the UK, I'm not sure about the US, but I think what we need is a lot more TV programs that are focused again on gardening and landscaping. Certainly like we had around about the turn of the millennium. We had a lot of TV programs, and that attracted a lot of interest and a lot of people into the sector. We don't have that so much. It's much more about cooking and all that sort of stuff. And of course, those programs encourage people to go into being a chef. So I think really it's about, I think what would really help the recruitment from a sort of strategic level is having a lot more media coverage, a lot more TV programs that show the life of a landscaper, if you like.
Right.
The problem we've got in the UK, though, is fundamentally there are just not enough people to run this economy. We've got vacancies, unfilled vacancies across the whole UK economy of 1.4 million unfilled vacancies. And, all my clients are struggling to get quality landscapers. And that's really interesting. There are quality landscapers out there to run a team, but you're having to pay more to attract them, which then means, of course, that your unit cost of delivering a garden in terms of the labor cost goes up, which means you need to pass it on to the customers. So at what point does that passing the price on suppress demand? So we're in a really interesting, challenging situation. And we've got massive economic headwinds coming our way. And they're really interesting because previous recessions, there's been high unemployment. If we have our economic difficulties now, there's incredibly low unemployment, but we've still got economic difficulties. So it's a very interesting time we're in. Yeah. And I think, so what am I saying to my clients? If they can't attract quality staff, then they're gonna have to re-engineer some of the work they're doing to make it less labor intensive, less complicated perhaps, and much more simple designs that are going perhaps easier to implement from slightly less skilled people. So it's really challenging, incredibly challenging.
No, for sure. And yeah, I'm having similar conversations where, we've seen labor going up 20-30%.
Yeah.
Materials has gone up, same thing, 20 to 50% depending on products. So yeah, the challenge is, you pass that on to your clients. Clients are, in certain demographics are either accepting those increases or they're taking longer to make decisions, or they're just putting it off for a while. But then clients are also, maybe they've gone 5-10% increases with clients over the last couple of years, but now that they're in that dilemma, well, do I pass on that 20-30% clients for things like maintenance contracts, or do I have discussions around reducing my scope of work so I still keep the client, but just have a reduced scope? So same thing, there's labor issues, there's price issues, and it's putting people in this area which they've never seen before, as you say.
I think you're right. I mean, I'm talking to people clients that have never experienced inflation.
Yeah.
And I was born in 1960, so very much aware of what was going on in the 70s and know what inflation is like. And so some of these sort of economic situations are quite new to people. So it's really, really interesting. I mean, the other thing, of course, that one can do is mechanize as much as possible. The problem is, of course, if you're building very high quality gardens that are very detailed, mechanizing a lot of that is quite difficult still, really, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So you know, I mean, what's really interesting is that we've got. I think what's, you know, it sounds like we're moaning about the problems. I actually don't think. I don't think it's moaning. I think, you know, certainly in the UK, we're at the point of the greatest opportunities ever, you know, for our sector. Absolutely. I remain totally convinced about that. Phenomenal opportunities. However, capitalizing on those opportunities is really difficult and challenging, and doing business at the moment, post-COVID, in a sort of high energy cost, high inflation world is challenging. So the real frustration is we've got massive opportunities, huge, unbelievable. Yet capitalizing on them is so difficult.
Well, that's where you and I come in, Neville.
Exactly.
You know, with us having the experience of talking to multiple different owners within the industry, finding out the trends and opportunities, then we can share that experience with our clients. I'm seeing more and more demand for, you know, coaching consultants to navigate through that. And I'm a firm believer that, yes, we're definitely seeing recession issues and headwinds coming our way, but I'm also a firm believer that there is a lot of opportunities that come out of that. And a lot of us to do with that mindset. If you put your mind to into that growth mode, then what are the things you could do to grab, I call it land, from opportunities while other people are still sleeping, or they're so consumed with what's going on in the financial world that they're stagnant.
Exactly. I mean, I often talk about this at conferences. I use the phrase VUCA. I don't know if you've heard that, but I say that we live in a VUCA world, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But then as I explain that term, I tell people that we've always lived in a VUCA world. My parents lived in a VUCA world. My grandparents did. You know, that is what the world is like. The exciting point about living in a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, is that actually it does provide those fantastic opportunities for those people that have the nerve, the nous, the energy, and the appetite. A VUCA world really provides those opportunities.
No, I agree 100%. 100%. And, you know, we have our conference coming up in a couple of weeks, the Elevate conference down in Orlando. It'll be interesting just to see what discussions are happening amongst industry leaders there. But, you know, there'll be opportunities to look at things like, you know, mechanization, robotics. What are some of the things coming down the pipeline to help companies become a little bit more efficient and lean on some of that technology changes? Just to see how they can, how can they navigate through this?
You're absolutely right, but it's also about how do you encourage your staff to innovate, even at very simple levels, even on that day-to-day basis. You know, how can they innovate to make that job much more efficient and much more cost effective? And I think trying to create that innovation culture at whatever level within a business is really important.
No, I agree 100%. Neville, we're just coming up towards the end of our time here. How can any parting words for anybody in the horticulture industry across either ponds, and how can people get in touch with you just to find out more about what you do, what you offer to clients?
Great. Well, I've got a website, nevillestein.com, NEVILLESTEIN, nevillestein.com. You can contact me via that website. Just put a search my name into Google. There's another Neville Stein in the world, and he's down in Savannah, Georgia. Don't contact him because he's an accountant and he might think it's a bit weird. Or you can contact me, you know, on Facebook. There's two of us, me and Neville in Savannah. I'm easily found on Facebook or LinkedIn. You know, there's just two of us in the world, I think.
Perfect. And then they can see what services you offer there, and
yeah, exactly. But you know what? What I prefer is having a phone call. And I don't mind, if someone's phoning me from the US or whatever. I've done work in China, and so I'm used to working. I'm currently doing some work with a company in New Zealand, so I'm used to taking phone calls at odd hours. But I love it. I really, I absolutely adore helping landscapers drive profitability.
Okay, cool. Neville,
thanks.
Such a pleasure talking to you today.
Great.
Good
luck. Have a good afternoon.
Okay, take care, Neville.
Appreciate time.
Okay,
thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
That was the Commercial Landscaper podcast hosted by Robert Clinkenbeard, and I'm the author of the Ironman Mindset for Entrepreneurs. If you want to find out more about the show, you're welcome to go to thecommerciallandscaper.com, or if you want to learn more about courses, education, buying some books, even if you want to just drop a note and suggest a guest, I'd love to hear from you. Again, this is Robert Clinkenbeard, the Commercial Landscaper podcast. Cheers, everyone.